Hey, my name is Joe,
And I'm Mary Beth.
and this is the best of Gen X.
We are in our 40s.
And we're siblings,
We'll talk about adulting in a world so different from the one we grew up in,
so excuse us while we save a generation.
one episode at a time.
Let's go.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, Mary Beth.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Great. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter, sister. I'm excited to see you today.
Same. I've been looking forward to this.
Me too. And we're both wearing kind of like Eastery colored shirts.
We look like little Easter eggs.
I know. Is that called pastel?
Yes,
Is that what these are?
it is.
Okay.
How was your week?
It was pretty good. Work week was pretty stressful, but kind of ramping up. We have a big industry deadline at the beginning of June, so we're kind of leading up to that. However, since we've last spoke on this podcast, I had one of the most amazing, fun, stress-free guys' weekends that I think I've ever had in my life.
Yeah?
Yeah, so it was a mixture of some old high school teammates and just high school friends / college friends. There's about 12 of us, and I just had the best time. We pitched in for some food that one of them cooked, 2 of the nights that we were there. It was at this like 1960s old school type of golf resort where you could literally pull your golf cart up to your back balcony, and the hole was like right behind you. Like the first hole was right behind you. And we brought bourbon and beers and food.
Like Dirty Dancing.
We brought just some petty cash for some gambling because we did like a little side bet. It was like a scramble thing. And it was just so fun. It was several of the people that you knew and went to school with. And I laughed the entire time. From
Awesome.
Friday to Sunday, I laughed the entire time I was there.
That's
and
great.
I just had the best time.
That makes me happy.
Yeah, it was really exciting. And I hope to be invited back to those again because they do them pretty often.
Oh, they do?
From what I understand. Different locations and such.
Cool.
Yeah, so it was really fun. So that was last weekend. How about you?
Right on. Well, the most exciting thing in my life, I got new skincare. I always get excited when I buy new skincare products because there's that still naive hope that this will be the one that turns my skin around.
Oh, so you got new products or whatever to try.
Yes.
How did you land on the new product to try? Did you
Damn
see
it.
it somewhere?
TikTok.
Gotcha.
I need to stay away from that place.
Is Mom still pretty heavily on that, or?
Yeah, she's on a lot.
Yeah, she still adds me to those texts with the videos that I can't watch.
Just create an account.
I don't want to. I don't seek to do this. I don't want to do it.
Create an account just so you can see them.
No, I'm not going to do it.
Okay.
You can't make me.
Okay.
I'm just going to continue to bitch about the fact that I can't see her videos that she sends.
Yeah, so, I don't know. How do I look?
You look ravishing.
Is it working?
You look amazing.
Am I glowing?
Yes, you're glistening.
Okay. Good. I have some news to share that I think our listeners will both appreciate and hate to hear.
Okay. I'm a little nervous.
So a few days from now, Kurt Loder turns 80 years old.
Wow.
80.
80. Okay.
Kurt Loder. 80
He's
years
almost
old.
10 years older than our dad?
Yes.
Wow. You're going to have to give me a second on that.
I know.
Yeah, this is really tough. This is really tough.
I know. In fact, I saw it just posted on a couple of Gen X sites that I follow, and I didn't believe it. So
Yeah,
I had to Google it.
Yeah, you Googled the dates and stuff.
It was true.
I cannot believe that. Yeah, because in the early 90s, so that was 30-ish. Yeah, okay. So he was, man.
Yeah.
He was in his 40s then.
Old.
Yeah. Damn it. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Every Gen Xer will get that Kurt Loder reference.
I also think I need to share my funniest meme of the day.
Oh, I have one too. And just so everybody knows, we have not shared this before the recording. So this is going to be a genuine, if we have the same one.
If we have the same one, I will not be surprised. Because we are of one brain. Sometimes.
Okay, ladies first.
All right, so picture this. You have maybe a sort of gray background. You have a man and a woman.
Okay, it's a different one.
Okay, you have, they are both wearing plain black, no embellishments of any kind, just black. So that the only pop of color in the photo is this adorable white fluffy bunny rabbit. Mm-hmm. Both of them appear to be, sort of delicately holding with each hand. They're each holding this bunny rabbit together. And both the man and the woman have very serious looks on their faces. They're not smiling, cheesy. It's just very sort of serene expressions. Mm-hmm. At the top of the meme, it says Happy Easter. That's not the best part. The best part is that the man and woman in this picture are older, Glenn Close and Michael Douglas. Exactly. If you haven't seen the meme, it's my favorite Easter meme of the day.
And that was, remind me, that's not Basic Instinct. What was that?
Fatal Attraction.
Fatal Attraction. Yeah, Basic Instinct was a Sharon Stone.
Where she boils the bunny.
Yeah. God, she was.
So they're both just.
She was wonderfully crazy in that movie. She did really good in that movie.
That was fantastic. So that one made me happy.
Yeah, that's a good. That's a good one. Mine was pretty simple. It was just a picture, and it was kind of like an animated picture of Jesus Christ. That's like the second time you've knocked that culture
Second
down.
time.
It was a animated picture of Jesus Christ leaning up against like a tomb, and it said Happy Easter, I think, on the top. It was the top or the bottom. That's irrelevant.
Feeling cute today might save the world.
Or no, but it said like at either the top or the bottom. It said Happy Easter, and in the middle it said YOLO. I LOL'd.
Oh, that's funny.
Yep.
Well, this episode today is special. Like I said, I've been looking forward to talking about this because I have thought a lot about it, especially in recent years, and I think that it's something that we all struggle with. But when I realized that this episode would be coming out on Easter Sunday, I thought, well, it's the perfect time to talk about forgiveness. And I'm not interested in making this a preachy thing. We have listeners all over the world, and I'm sure we have listeners of all different faiths. But it's kind of a tightrope, if you're a Christian, and forgiveness is fundamental to, our core belief in Jesus dying on the cross and then being resurrected, paying for our sins through that crucifixion. The whole idea of biblical forgiveness for me is inextricably bound to my own thoughts on forgiveness and my own experiences with it. So I'm going to try to just keep it balanced. I'll try not to be too religious about it. But I think forgiveness, regardless, is whether you're talking about biblical or secular, I just think it's important and beneficial no matter what, to your own well-being, to your relationships, etc. So I just thought
you had an early jump on this topic. I remember
did.
2 or 3
I was like,
weeks ago you mentioned it.
Easter Sunday. It's all a celebration of Christ's sacrifice and God's forgiveness of our sins. And
yeah, that's a good call.
And I was like, ooh, forgiveness. I could go on for days.
Can I do it one time?
Yeah.
Even if you don't love me anymore, forgiveness.
Forgiveness.
Sorry, I know Josh has been like...
My husband's been singing that.
God love him.
I know.
He and I are the same soul. I would do the exact same thing.
Well, the thing is, he didn't know that it had already been playing in my head for the last couple weeks. And so when he started singing it, I was like, no.
Yeah. Don't go there.
Well, let's start by telling each other what we think forgiveness is, like without looking it up.
Okay.
What is forgiveness to you?
I guess the first thing I think of when somebody asks me or says that word, to me, it's letting go of negative feelings or emotions towards someone or like people that hurt me. That's the first thing I think of. Am I close?
Well, it's not about right or wrong. I just wondered, how you define it. There are multiple definitions. For me, that's not where my mind goes immediately. My mind first goes to the act of releasing someone of a debt. And that can be an actual debt, a financial debt.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Or an emotional debt.
I see what you're saying.
Right? So
kind of like loan forgiveness.
So it's like
that.
Releasing somebody. Right. So it's, for me, it's not internal. When I first think about forgiveness, I think it's an act, a gift, a commitment, to release someone else of the burden that they owe you something anymore.
Why do you think two people can think so differently about it? Like, why do you think you and I, our first thought is something different? Like, why would we both define it differently? Why do you think that is?
Just because we have such different life experiences, and we're both bringing our own prior understanding of what it means and what it looks like in real life. And it's not the kind of topic that only a few people can relate to. It's something we've all been able to relate to or can relate to. And so I guess it's going to look different to everyone. And, maybe it's as simple as that.
That makes sense.
Well, I wanted to look up the actual definition, and it took me down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but Merriam-Webster says it's to cease to feel resentment against an offender. To cease to feel resentment against. That caught me off guard.
Isn't that kind of what I was getting at?
Right, but...
So I was right. I'm just joking. I'm teasing. I know there's no right or wrong.
Well, what I thought was odd about it is that a few years ago, that would not have been the definition in the dictionary. Now, the dictionaries are constantly updating.
So you think it's changed, is what you're saying?
I know it's changed.
Okay.
Because when I saw that, I was like, that has not always been the very first. Because you know how they answer, when a word can have multiple meanings, mm-hmm. It's usually the most common meaning that's first. And yeah. Right out of the gate, that being the first thing, no, that's not. I'm like, I look at that and I'm like, that's relatively new.
Which means you have an idea of what the older...
Right. But then it says to give up resentment of. And then it says to grant relief from payment of. Mm-hmm. And payment doesn't have to mean money, right?
Right.
So I started to Google the definition of forgiveness. So Google AI says this. Forgiveness is a conscious decision to release resentment, anger, and the desire for retribution towards someone who's wronged you. It's not about condoning their actions or forgetting the hurt, but about shifting your focus from the negative emotions to a more positive and compassionate state. Forgiveness is ultimately a choice to heal yourself and move forward, rather than clinging to the pain and resentment. So my flags go up because I know that only in recent years have people begun to talk, because we've reached a very therapeutic age, if you will. We're all getting online and diagnosing ourselves and each other. Mm-hmm. We are all pathologizing the human experience. Okay. We're all healing from quote unquote trauma. Like trauma is being overused. And because of that, it's being diluted. Mm-hmm. We live in the age of therapy and self. So I know that in the last decade, I just started to hear conversations online about forgiveness not being about another person. Forgiveness is about self-healing. And so if these conversations, in my experience, are just in the last several years starting to happen, I know good and well that this definition has been altered, and probably fairly recently.
You're so smart.
Well,
so perceptive.
And maybe it's my English background. So, well, I guess I'm in tune to things like this because meanings of words matter. Especially as an English teacher, I pay close attention to word choice. And when you're trying to communicate in any form, you want to choose just the right word. You know, like, for example, saying someone is childlike versus childish. Mm-hmm. Okay? On the surface, you want to say it means the same thing, but it doesn't mean the same thing exactly. And so when you're trying to clearly communicate how you feel or whatever, meaning matters very much. Another example, my antenna went up in the last 5 years when people started defining racism differently. Suddenly, there was this additional phrasing of power plus prejudice. And I say to myself, my antenna go up. Like, what the hell? That's not always been there. Mm-hmm. You know, like in my lifetime, so many words have changed meanings. And some of them can be very consequential, right? And so racism is a perfect example because it's not enough. Like you used to look it up in the dictionary in 2014, 2000, you look it up in Webster and it's going to say prejudice. Now it's prejudice plus power. In other words, only those in power in any kind of system, big or small, can be racist.
Right. That's obviously not true.
It's obviously not true.
It's become so consequential that it's almost prevented people from even having conversations about it.
Exactly. And you know what? That is by design.
Oh, 100%.
This kind of shit. And this kind of shit is done by design to shut down conversation so that the ones who are yelling the loudest are the ones we are supposed to listen to. They set the narrative, right? So you now with this new definition, which by the way was changed by Merriam-Webster because of an email from a fucking 22-year-old college student. So fuck off. Okay?
I don't know. How in the hell do you know that?
I looked it up.
Damn Miriam. What's wrong with her?
These things bother me.
What's wrong with her?
When we just are so willy-nilly about changing definitions like that can have huge ramifications.
Oh, for sure.
So obviously I noticed when that definition of forgiveness popped up because I know it's not always been so self-focused.
Oh, no.
Okay?
No. Our whole world has just more, like you said, more recently become that way.
Well, we're all neurotic.
We never heard that when we were growing up.
Right.
Ever.
And so we've become neurotic and we all need therapy and we all have, quote, trauma. And so I went down a little rabbit hole to try to find. I challenge any of you out there to Google when and how the definition of forgiveness evolved. I had one website that gave me a little bit of hope, but then I found that it was behind a paywall and I wasn't going to pay for it. But the best I could find was that the definition of forgiveness in the modern dictionary was updated as recently as 2023. And so I would imagine that was maybe not added, but maybe put closer to the top of the list. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to point that out for a minute. I wanted to take a minute because I think it's very telling of our culture. And I think it's important to be aware of these changes. You can't. Now, I'm going to get on a soapbox. I don't feel this strongly about forgiveness in its definition. I do, however, feel strongly about arbitrary, activist, social engineering bullshit behind some of these meaning changes. It's important that we don't accept it, and it's not enough to just ignore it. It must be called out. I would just want to encourage anyone out there, when you hear something that's bullshit, when you said that's obviously wrong, well, I don't hear enough people speaking up and saying, I do not accept your definition. That is obviously wrong. Not enough people are doing it, and we need to. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that.
Because when meaning changes,
Yeah,
a lot.
Probably just depends on what the context of the situation is, because obviously day to day people aren't like walking around going, I'm really pissed about that forgiveness change, definition changing. I need to say something to somebody about it.
Yeah,
Just
but
kind of
when it
depends
comes
on the
to
context of the situation.
When it comes to how society is being socially engineered because of some of these things, it's important to not let words lose their meaning.
Yeah.
So anyway, point is, regardless of how we define it, it is a very complicated process indeed, forgiveness. And it is a process. And I want to refer to some notes that I found because I wanted to see what are people, what are the experts saying about how to forgive someone or what it looks like.
What type of experts are these?
These would be either theologians,
Oh, okay.
philosophers, or therapists.
Okay.
Okay, so I found one that listed 7 steps to forgiveness. And I just wanted to, run these off real quick. So acknowledge the pain. Mm-hmm. You recognize and accept the emotions associated with the hurt or the wrongdoing. So acknowledge the pain. 2 is understand the situation. That's where you explore the circumstances surrounding the hurt and consider the perspectives of all involved. So it's taking time to understand and not just like a knee-jerk, response. Release negative emotions is number 3. Let go of anger, resentment, and bitterness. I find it strange the order that these are in. Because I
feel like I'm in an AA meeting.
Well, releasing negative emotions, wouldn't you imagine, would be like one of the last steps?
Yes.
Because that's going to take the longest.
Yes.
Like, who are these?
And let me clarify, I've never been to an AA meeting, and I'm not trying to downplay anybody that has. But it just feels very much like
the steps.
Yeah.
Then it's develop empathy. Try to understand the person's motivations and the reasons for their actions. That can be controversial.
I subscribe to a little bit of that.
I do too, but I think it can be controversial.
Okay. No, I agree. Yeah, I agree. The only reason I say that is because in my career, I've worked for at least one place that it was almost their motto was assume positive intent.
I think that's the modern business motto.
So
assume positive intent.
Yep.
But I'm talking about developing empathy, trying to understand the person's motivations, like the person who hurt you. Trying to develop empathy as part of your forgiveness process.
Yeah.
The reason I say it's controversial is because you're going to have some people who are like genuinely in a disturbing way traumatized. Mm-hmm. Do you want to develop empathy for your abuser? Do you want to develop empathy for the person who murdered your child? Right? So that's where it can get controversial is the empathy part. I'm not sure that that's a necessary component. So the next one is choose to forgive, which I think it's really strange that it's that far down the list. I would think that that would be the first step.
Yeah.
You agree?
Yeah, I would If I had that list, I would probably put that closer to the top.
Well, because forgiveness is not a feeling. Forgiveness is a decision.
I was going to say like a choice.
A choice, and you kind of have to make that choice and then go through these steps to make it
Yeah, whether or not you're
work.
even going to do it.
Huh?
Whether or not you're even going to do it.
Right. But once you choose to forgive, then you go through these steps to kind of process it all and to heal. So it's weird, but it says make a conscious decision to let go of the hurt and move forward. Let go of the hurt and move forward. And see, that's the part that is tricky for me, because I don't know that it's a decision to let go of the hurt, because I think the hurt is going to take a long time to heal in many circumstances. Depending on the situation, you know, the pain of it's going to take a long time for some people to get through. But you let go of the, in my opinion, you're really letting go of the desire for revenge.
Yeah.
Or the desire to punish, or, you know, those sort of things. You're releasing that person.
Yeah. That's really hard.
Letting go of the hurt comes
really hard
later.
for some people.
Yeah. The next step is to seek renewal. That's focusing on personal growth and healing, and consider seeking support from a professional or, you know, close friends, whatever. And then it's accept responsibility. So if you have wronged someone, acknowledge the harm you caused, apologize, and make amends. I don't know. I mean, that's what Google's going to give you. If you Google how to forgive, that's what's going to pop up. And I just feel like it's...
Was that from like an actual person or just AI?
Google AI, that is the first thing that's going to pop up.
God
help us.
Yeah, I was going to say, it makes you wonder who put that stuff together.
Who did that? Damn bots. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly some truth to some of that. But,
Sure.
You know, some of it's like contextual, some of it's probably misplaced.
Yeah, and I think that it's like I've said, it's a commitment. It's like saying, I'm not going to make this person pay. You're deciding, I'm not going to make this person pay for what they did. The cost or the price doesn't go away. You absorb the cost. Do you see how this definition, the traditional definition, I am applying in an emotional way? Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So there's still a cost, whether you're talking about money or a relationship. There is a cost, there's a price to pay. And so you're basically saying, your release of that responsibility, I'm going to absorb it one way or another. So if I own a store, and you come in and you break a lamp in my store, and I forgive you for doing that, means I'm not going to make you pay for it, but I'll have to pay for it one way or another. I'll have to make up that cost. I'll have to eat that cost, or I'll have to buy another one. Right? So I think it's the same thing emotionally. You're releasing a person. You're saying, I'm not going to make this person pay. You're agreeing to absorb that cost. You're committed to not bringing it up. That's another thing. Mm. If you're truly committed to forgiving someone, you're committing to not bringing it up to them over and over again. You look doubtful. Come on.
Well, I mean, I just think it's difficult for people. Everybody's going to react differently to a situation. So even if they come to grips with forgiveness, or the choice of forgiving something or someone, or like you said, like a debt or whatever the case is, it doesn't mean that they're not going to revisit it or that they have to or should, you know what I mean?
Well, I didn't say that you're committing to not think about it ever again.
I didn't say that either. I'm
just saying, if you tell someone you're in an ongoing relationship with, whether it's a friendship, a family member, or a romantic partner, whatever, if they atone, if they apologize, and you want to move forward and you want to heal what broke, and you say, I forgive you, I'm committed to forgiving you, I'll work on this, you have to, that's got to be part of the deal.
Oh, well, that's different.
Because you can't keep bringing it up and up over and over.
That's different. I guess I was just, okay. So you're saying if they've atoned, they understand.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. So maybe I just misunderstood. But.
Yeah. So you can't keep punishing the person over and over. And that's the same with self-forgiveness too. Like
if the opposite were true, I sure as hell would remind them.
What do you mean the opposite?
If they didn't like atone and didn't, apologize or accept whatever, and there was no understanding that I shouldn't keep bringing it up because you owned up to it, I would.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other component.
I would have trouble not bringing it up again.
That's a whole other component, and I think we'll get into it about reconciliation.
Yeah,
that's a misunderstanding that we make, is that forgiveness is somehow interchangeable with reconciliation or restoration, and it's not.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is not the same thing as reconciling.
Sure, I get that.
But I think we'll put a pin in that because I think we'll get into it. So my point was forgiveness should be granted before, or it is granted before the pain and anger goes away. Over time, if you're honoring that commitment to forgive, those feelings subside. It takes work, but the anger diminishes.
Yeah.
But you've got to first commit to the act itself. But I have a couple questions before we go to break.
Okay.
If you could write a forgiveness recipe, what would the ingredients be?
Oh gosh.
Like I just listed those 7 steps, but what do you think they would be?
I mean, if it were my situation, you're just basically saying for me to grant forgiveness.
You, but also if you were, trying to help others, like, man, I really want to understand forgiveness. I want to be able to forgive. How do you do it? Like, and you just wrote it all down. Like what would have to be involved for forgiveness to happen? For it to work?
Some level of understanding. Honoring what you say or do. Those 2 jump out. Gosh, you put me on the spot.
That's what I do.
That is what you do. Damn you. I don't know. I'm kind of stuck on those 2. What about you?
I think you have to understand what happened, why it happened, and like the 7 steps, I agree that you have to acknowledge the hurt that it caused you. I think that it should involve the commitment, like we've said, and the commitment is tough. The commitment is, like I said, not bringing it up over and over. If in the context of a relationship, an ongoing relationship, I think it must involve sincerity. This is not the sort of thing, in other words, that you could say to keep the peace. You can't say you forgive someone if you really don't. That's not fair. So sincerity must be and 2, if you're asking someone for forgiveness and they say they forgive you but they don't, so sincerity is essential. That's got to be part of it.
How do you measure that though? Like, how do you know if somebody's being? I mean, obviously, I guess you can look at someone and feel like they're not being sincere, but how would you really know if they would be? Like if you said, if you and I got some kind of issue and you said, hey, I forgive you, how do I know that you're being sincere?
because I'm not giving you shit about it constantly.
Okay, so it's like what happens. It's you
Yeah.
can base it off of what happens next or
Sure.
in the future. Okay.
Sure. And that's not to say that a person wouldn't slip up,
Yeah.
because, like I said, the hurt's going to linger depending on what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Some things are easier to get over than others. So if it's something where the hurt lingers, like an affair, but a real betrayal, it's going to take a while for that person to earn your trust back. And that's not to say that someone won't
Yeah.
say something in the heat of the moment and then regret, and then
a little bit.
but you'll know they're sincere when they catch themselves, or when you say, "Hey, we've resolved." You said about, if you point it out to them and they say, "You're right. I'm sorry. You're right. Let's stay focused on the issue right now."
Yeah. Or if they give you a big up yours with the
Yeah, I mean, there are ways you can tell moving forward if the person is sincere. That has to be that has to be part of it. I would argue that you may not need to involve another person. I'm not wholly convinced that someone else needs to be involved in the process.
So what do you mean by that?
Well, think of every time someone's hurt you. Have you always gone to that person and told them, "Hey, you hurt me,
Oh, so
and I want to fix this"?
That's kind of where I thought you were going with that. So you basically mean like you can still forgive somebody,
and they have no idea.
and that yeah, that's totally fair. I'm sure I've done that at some point in my life.
So I'm not sure that I would include that in my recipe, although I would say that it's kind of forgiveness is kind of a divisive topic. And I think some people would insist, especially many Christians would insist that be part of it, because the Bible does say when you're standing in prayer in Mark 11:25, I believe, if you're standing in prayer and you have a beef with someone, you must stop in that moment and forgive them in that moment. But it also says later in Luke, I believe, to go to that person and try to make amends. Because Paul tells us to, where it's possible, be at peace with each other. So that's the ideal. And I think that's what Christians should strive for. But I don't think that it's a guarantee. Mm-hmm. Because I think in some cases it's just not possible.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or not healthy. If forgiveness was a journey, what would the most rewarding part be?
For me, I think it would probably be allowing me or helping me work on like letting things go and finding peace.
Well, let me ask you this, and maybe I should have started with this. Have you ever asked for forgiveness?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, like, really ask for forgiveness.
Yeah, of like something I did, like self-forgiveness.
Yeah. No, not self-forgiveness. Have you ever gone to someone that you were in some kind of relationship with, professional, work, or not work, but, friendships or relationships? Have you ever done something and then have to go to someone and say, "Please forgive me," and plea for forgiveness?
Yeah. Are you going to ask me to like give you details of a situation?
I might.
I mean, yeah, I have. That doesn't necessarily mean it was like super serious.
I guess that's what I mean, because we can forgive little things, and we do all the time. Especially when you're in an ongoing, romantic relationship, when you're living with someone. I mean, Josh and I are forgiving each other all the time. We're asking for forgiveness and forgiving each other all the time. But I meant like, those really serious.
Not something super serious. No, I don't feel like I don't feel like I can remember a time when I've had to do that for something super serious.
So you're perfect.
No, I'm not.
I want to know how you get to your 40s and never doing that.
I mean,
have you just never done anything wrong?
That's not what I said.
No, I know. I'm trying to get it out. Like, we're trying to figure this out. Have you never hurt someone that bad?
I don't feel like, no, not that badly.
Damn.
I mean, I'm not perfect. I just don't feel like I ever put myself. I guess I consciously like would prevent myself from being in those kind of situations. Or if I felt like it was going to lead to that, I would get out of it first, or I would remove myself from it. So it's almost like I was proactive. You know what I mean? Like I was thinking about what the outcome would be if this, then this. You know what I mean?
Do you never just like fucked up and then had to go to somebody and say, I fucked up, please forgive me? Either
No, I mean, I don't know if we're counting like dumb shit that we did as teenagers that you made your parents really, really upset and disappointed and it ate at you for weeks. Yeah, I've done stuff like that. But as far as like doing something to someone that made them feel that way, no, I don't feel like I've done that
you know of.
that I know of. Right, right. Maybe I have and I didn't see it that way, and maybe they forgave me and I didn't know there was anything to be forgiven. But I can't think of like one serious instance that I've really wronged someone or made someone feel like, I had to forgive them. I can't think of one.
That's worth looking at. To be in your mid 40s and to not be able to think of one either means you have superhuman strength and will.
That's possible.
To stay away from.
That's possible.
From hurting someone, or you lack self-awareness and you just hurt people and don't know you hurt people and don't.
I mean, I know that's not the case.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah, I know that's not the case.
Have you ever been in a situation where you've been asked for forgiveness? Like, has someone ever come to you and just, I did this and I'm so sorry and please forgive me, and it was just a hard, process.
Again, nothing super serious. Nothing super serious. I know that's not the answer you're looking for, but I can't recall a time that anyone has come to me in that kind of situation and had to have a serious heart-to-heart, like I apologize or I need forgiveness for this or that. Not that I can think of.
I am stunned.
Why?
Because it means one of two things. You're so strong and firmly rooted in your values that you've never done anything regretful to hurt someone you care about enough to have to go to them and beg forgiveness. You're so strong that you've avoided that when all other humans haven't.
Well, I mean,
or
I'll think of a couple then. I'll try to come up with a couple. But I just don't feel like I've done that. I'm aware of. I don't feel like I've done anything horribly enough to where people will be like, "Screw that guy."
But even in past relationships, and you have heated arguments, or you say something really shitty, or
well, you've already said that it wasn't in that kind of way. You said it was something different.
No. I mean, because
I've had those for sure.
But like serious conversations where you have to, resolve something with someone you love and say, I said this and it really hurt you, and you go days without talking, and I mean like
yeah, yes, for sure I've done that, and I said that earlier, but you were like no, I thought you said something like no, I meant something like super serious, like not just like arguments and stuff like that. I've had that kind of stuff, yeah.
Where you just say I'm sorry, but like where you've had to like really,
yes,
please forgive me.
Yeah, I've had that. And
then wonder, are they going to forgive me?
Yeah, I've had that. For sure.
Now he says.
Well, I mean, it's like you went back and went against what you said.
No, because you compared it to like, silly things you do as teenagers, disappointing the parents. I wasn't talking about those sort of things where we're all screwing up, you know what I mean? But like when you do things that when you do things, I guess what I mean is Have you done things that put your relationships at great risk?
I don't know about great risk.
Okay, at risk.
Yes, but nothing that I didn't feel couldn't be solved with a conversation.
Solved without forgiveness being part of it? Like, I'm not talking about, couples like we're having a hard time, but we can get through this. We're having a rough patch. We can get through this. I'm talking about like where forgiveness was necessary. Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a couple. I don't know how much detail you're asking for or how specific you want me to get into it.
It's up to you. If forgiveness was a journey, I'll circle back.
Yeah,
what would be the most rewarding part?
You're asking what the most rewarding part is?
Yeah.
What is the deal, Mary Beth?
What?
You're like putting me on the spot, one after the other.
We're having an important conversation.
I know, but
Now, see, it's easy for me to answer that because my mind goes to several different situations in my life where I can think, yeah, I've been there. Yeah, I've had to forgive something really hard and I've been asked for forgiveness. Or I've had to ask for forgiveness because I've just fucked up so royally. So it's easy for me to answer what's most rewarding. What's most rewarding is when there is true reconciliation and true restoration of a relationship. And when two people, friends, lovers, whatever, two people are able to really work through something that could have ultimately ended their relationship for good.
okay, well,
That's rewarding.
okay, hearing you say that, to me, the most rewarding part of it, if I have to go through it, is being able to just move on. Regardless of the outcome, I just like to move on. I'm the type that I don't like to sit there, good or bad, whatever the outcome is, good or bad, from a forgiveness perspective, whether you do or not, or I do or not, I just want to be done with it.
I know.
I'm that kind of person.
I know.
Yeah.
See, that I wondered.
So that, to me, that's rewarding.
I really did wonder how you were going to handle this topic, because I know you, and I know you'll do anything to avoid confrontation.
Yeah.
Anything.
And I'm sincere in saying I think that's why I don't have many examples in my head to go off of, because I typically avoid it.
Brother, this is a perfect time to take a break because...
Or I try to get ahead of it.
Listen, this is a perfect time to take a break because this is kind of where I was headed. I almost wanted you to come to that realization because I knew that about you.
You're like a psychologist. I feel like I'm in therapy.
I don't mean to make you feel that way, but
do you charge by the hour or by the session?
But I do want us both to learn through this process. My life has been so enriched by this podcast in so many ways. Not just, first and foremost, getting closer with you in a different way as adults and getting to know you better.
I get that.
Which is weird because we've been close our whole life.
Yeah, we have.
But I do feel like I'm getting to know you better in a different way. And so the closeness, I love. I cherish that. But I'm also learning things about myself. And I want you to as well.
Yeah, I am.
So I knew that about you. I was just trying to see if you'd figure it out.
That was well played. Well played. Masterfully played. Masterfully played.
Okay. Well, then I'll let you take a break from that trauma.
Yeah, man.
Okay.
Hey, listeners. Do you like judging people as much as we do?
Then judge us.
To submit your criticisms and complaints about our show, you can reach us at gotohell@bazinga.biz.
For all other comments, questions, or suggestions about future episodes, drop us a line. Send us a text from our website at thebestofgenx.buzzsprout.com and click on the link just above the show notes.
Or email us at thebestofgenx@gmail.com.
Okay, we're back. Joe had a moment to himself to contemplate his life choices.
No kidding, man. I got super deep.
All right. So before we move on, I want to share a couple emails from our listeners. So we have one from Claudia S. from Hendersonville, North Carolina. She says, "Hey, Mary Beth and Joe, I couldn't help but smile hearing about your Comic-Con adventure in Indianapolis. Your enthusiasm was infectious."
Oh, nice.
I know. I thought that was cute.
Yeah, that is cool.
And then another one from Karen L. from West Hollywood, California. "Mary Beth and Joe, I recently listened to your episode on the Best of Gen X about the joys and pains of driving in our 40s. I couldn't help but chuckle at the shared nostalgia and relate to the hurdles of today's roads," and that's metaphorical roads, compared to the freedom of our youth.
Well, that's really nice.
Yeah. I thought that was great. So thank you all for sending in. It was great to hear from you. And I'm glad you enjoyed what you heard.
Yeah, especially the Comic-Con one, because that was super fun to do.
That was so
with
fun
Jennifer.
to do. It was like reliving
I
it.
was so anxious for that episode.
Yeah.
to record.
There was a big build up to that.
Big build.
Speaking of build up, this is a great time to remind you all, Game of Thrones.
Dun, dun,
Get your GOT on
dun, dun,
if you want to be able to follow along in our conversation in July. It'll happen.
I'm giving you like
I will say my piece.
doing like the background music while you're
I
talking.
hear it. So that's a reminder. We mentioned it at the top of the last show. Now's the time for a rewatch or a first time watch, because we're going to be talking about it, and you're going to want to understand what we're saying.
Yeah, I might start that back over. Did you say you've started it back over at all?
No, because I'll get through it real quick.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting.
Yeah. You're
I want it to be nice and fresh.
Yeah, I get it. Good call.
All right. So in this second half, we want to talk about our personal relationship with forgiveness. So let's start with, how has your relationship with forgiveness changed over time?
Okay. So I feel like I can add to this. So for me, even in moments or situations where I was faced with a forgiveness decision, I never forgot. So, you hear people say, I forgive, but I haven't forgotten. Like, I have trouble with, like, forgetting. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
I think that's one of the biggest hurdles.
Yeah. So when I was younger, it was harder for me to forgive because I had so much trouble moving on if something really, really bothered me. Mm-hmm. I wanted to keep, I'm really bad about this still to this day a little bit, but I wanted to keep it inside or just kind of let it live in my head almost constantly. This is when I was younger. I guess I was naive in a way growing up to where I always assumed a positive intent. We talked about that earlier, or the best in people, because I just feel like that was kind of like what we were raised to, believe. And so when people or moments would flip that upside down, it's almost like I couldn't come to grips with it enough to move on from letting it consume me mentally. So as I've gotten older...
Well, let's just pause for a second. So are you saying that, was it more likely in your youth for some kind of offense or wrongdoing or offense against you? Was it more likely to end a relationship?
Oh, 100%.
Because you couldn't move on?
Like, you're dead to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was very petty as a youth, like with that kind of stuff.
Well,
not in general, but with that
probably
kind of
just didn't have the tools.
Yeah, for sure. But I would say as I've gotten older, it's much easier for me to let go and move on. I think part of that is because I know I've already lived one half of my life. This is where I'm going to kind of get a little deep. I know I've already lived one half of my life. And if you and I are being honest, probably more than half of my life, right? So as I've gotten older, it's almost like I've built more mental strength about negative things that happen to me by either someone or something, because I'm in that stage where I feel like every day and every moment or experience counts. Mm-hmm. And I may not have 20 more years. I hope I do. I hope I have at least 40 more. But to me now, time is so precious. I never thought about time as a kid or as a young guy or as a young man even. And so I've grown in the sense where I don't allow myself to not let things go. It's kind of like, if you do me wrong at this stage of my life, you're just not deserving of a life with me anymore. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. You're not deserving of intense thought from me. it's like I've allowed myself to just remove you from that like storage space in my brain, and I use that extra space to think about exciting moments and positive moments and people that I'll come across. It's like I'm more laser focused on what's in front of me. And if you're behind me now, it's like I'm not turning around and waving you on to catch up with me. That's just, to me, that's what it feels like. So if so like, let's say someone has done me wrong, that it's going to require forgiveness. Like, I'm almost to the point where if you say you forgive or whatever, I don't even think about it. I kind of acknowledge and I just move on, and I just keep going. It's almost like I don't slow down to even worry about that anymore.
I thought you were going in a different direction. I thought you were going to say, at this point in your life, time is precious, so
I'm more apt to forgive.
Yeah, but it sounds like you're just as unlikely to forgive as you were when you were younger. It's just for different reasons.
Maybe it didn't come out the right way. I'm kind of saying that. I'm kind of saying like I'm quick to forgive, and I'm quicker to like forget it. Like I wasn't able to forget it as a
Oh, sure. Okay.
I'm quicker to forgive, but I'm also just like I'm going to let it go. It's not even going to enter my brain. It's not worth it.
But also, it is easier as you get older to
remove that
person. Like
right, 100%. 100%. So maybe I didn't say it the right way, but that's
I get it.
That's what I was getting at. I don't stew on it anymore, or that person. I don't give that person enough cred.
Real estate in your head.
Exactly. Like I think I really struggled with that before because I think this is natural. When I was growing up, I'm not going to say just as a kid, but even when I was a young adult, like I wanted people to like me. I wanted people to accept me and, whatever. So I wanted that from people. I think everybody kind of does. Mm-hmm. So I was always real sensitive to relationships and how people viewed me and what they thought of me and how they reacted to things that I maybe did or said. But it's like, not anymore. Like I don't do it in like a jerky way. It's mm-hmm. It's like, okay, you stew on that now. I'm done with stewing on that kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
You've learned how to protect your peace better.
Yes. My peace is way more important than anything else at this stage of my life is where I'm kind of going with that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Mine is a little different. First, I know that now. I know that forgiveness is not weakness.
I struggle with that. When I was growing up.
Yeah.
I struggled with that.
I kind of did too, just because it's really hard when you're young to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And vulnerable is not weak. There's a difference, but we don't see that difference as distinctly as we do now.
It's hard for people to distinguish that.
You are vulnerable when you're willing to forgive someone and let them continue to be in your life and let them try to make amends with you and earn trust back, etc. But it's definitely not weakness. I used to think that it was a sign of weakness because the reason I felt that way I know now is because I kept allowing people into my life who continued to hurt me over and over again.
Made you feel less than
or no, just continued to hurt me.
Yeah.
And so every time I started to equate forgiveness with weakness because when you forgive, that person's just going to hurt you again.
Right. Well, that was
and then
easy.
They're just going to hurt you again.
Well, that was easy. She's just going to forgive me again.
Yeah. That's just because I was allowing people into my life and into my heart that didn't have the positive intentions I thought they did, mm-hmm. or just didn't care about me as the way that I thought they did. Or maybe didn't know how to love me. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, for sure.
I've also learned that I think that it's gotten harder. I think forgiveness has gotten harder and more complicated as we get older because the stakes are higher. We're not just talking about the kid that you sit at the lunch table with all the time or the kid that you hang out at recess with or just casual dating in college. I mean, the relationships become more serious. There's more at stake. You've invested more time and emotion mm-hmm. and maybe your body. As your relationships become more sacred, forgiveness becomes even more challenging and more complicated. So when I was younger, I think I was more apt to forgive and move on. Then I'm still quick to forgive, but it looks very different than it used to. I also never used to think about self-forgiveness until I fucked up hard enough. And that didn't happen until, I became a parent and went through a divorce and had some real struggles, a lot of which I kept to myself. And I'm not talking about a rock bottom thing. I'm just talking about you have to really do some serious damage or potential damage before you ever deal with the self-forgiveness thing. And that's something I never thought of when I was younger because nothing I ever did was that bad.
Right.
But hey, burn your parents' house down. Self-forgiveness becomes an issue.
I forgave you. I'm totally kidding.
And so did they.
I'm totally kidding.
But I mean, it's true.
Yeah, I never once in my life, just so you know, just so we're all clear, I never once in my life was like, damn her, ever. Never,
Okay.
Never once.
And I don't think that you were, and I know that mom and dad weren't.
For sure.
I couldn't forgive myself.
I know.
That wasn't the only, that was just the first. So self-forgiveness, you got to really screw up.
Yeah.
I also, when I was younger, I also used to see forgiveness as solely a transactional experience. Forgiveness was something that involved a collaborative process between you and the person who hurt you, or you and the person you hurt. However, as life gets more complicated and your relationships become more serious and sacred and important, and I learned the hard way that forgiveness doesn't always involve two people. It may start with two people because you have you and the person who hurt you and et cetera. But I used to think of it just as a transactional. It's like, they did this. Now, if we're going to continue this friendship or this relationship, we got to discuss this. And this person has to be sorry and say they're sorry and prove to me that I can trust them, and or prove that they're going to try to not do this again, to not hurt me in this way again, and vice versa. And then you move on together. That is just not what forgiveness is. It is not a transactional. It is not always a transactional, and it sometimes never has to be. Because it wasn't until, and this kind of overlaps to my next question, which is, what have we each learned from situations where we had to forgive someone? What have we learned from situations where we had to be forgiven? So it overlaps. I never used to think about forgiveness as internal versus external. I think I started to learn that with my divorce. And a couple years in, I was struggling. I was stressed and sick. I lost an insane amount of weight. I was not well. I was drinking a lot. And I was taking care of a child. Teaching. Had a really stressful, demanding job. And yet I was carrying around this incredible pain because it's not what I wanted. And I feel like it's okay to talk about this now because I've made clear before, my ex-husband, Mallory's dad, we have a great relationship and have for many years. And these are not things that I stew on but I have to be honest and say, she just turned 20 and we divorced when she was a year old. There are still things that come out of nowhere that will trigger that pain or that awful feeling of rejection or the resentment. Like when I am out shopping and it's Christmas season and I see a mom and dad shopping in the kids store for what Santa Claus is going to bring, I never got to experience that. Mm-hmm. So there are little resentments. I never got to have a second child. And those are things that I didn't choose.
Right.
So my point is, I learned through that process that sometimes you have to learn how to forgive and let go when you know an apology is never going to come. And I think that is probably the hardest thing for people to deal with when it comes to forgiveness, because you're talking about people who have been hurt, like abused by parents who are now dead or whatever. You know, when you are faced with forgiving someone, knowing that you're never, because you think, I'll feel better when I hear I'm sorry. But sorry never comes, and then what? You have to come to a point where you ask yourself, I need to give myself, I need to be happy again. I need to give myself permission to be happy again. And I need to figure out how to get out of this prison of pain. How do you do that when the other person is not involved? How do you do it when the person who hurt you doesn't know or doesn't care that they hurt you? I've learned a lot about those kinds of situations because I wasn't in those situations until I was older. Mm-hmm. And even as recently as, 2 years ago, I learned that you have to know how to forgive without reconciling. So like I said, growing up thinking that it's always a transactional, collaborative experience,
yeah,
I've learned the opposite in the second half of my life. That, no, most of the time it's a lonely process. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the hardest for people to overcome.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, I definitely agree with the coming to grips with forgiving without reconciliation.
Yeah, because you really do think that's going to make me feel better. Whether we continue this relationship, this friendship, whatever, or not, you really think you need to hear it. But the good news is that you don't need to hear it.
Yeah, I'm glad you went there because I certainly, and you know this, our family knows this, like I went through a situation similar. It was more recent, and the situation is in reverse, I guess, where I'll just come out and say it like it was my choice, mm-hmm. right? So my divorce was over 2 years ago, and I made the decision. I feel like it was the right decision. It still didn't make it easy. It was super difficult. Unlike you, my kids were older, almost grown or out of the house or whatever. So I guess I felt an extreme amount of guilt over it. So I struggled with that. But I still knew in the back of my mind it was the right decision. And it was healthier, I found, to not worry or wait for there to be any kind of reconciliation or like relationship after the fact. Even though I felt extremely guilty, and I'm sure the other person resents me for doing it, mm-hmm. but I also had years and years of resentment and kind of bitterness and anger towards what was going on. during the whole time. So anyway, I just say all that to say, I get where you're coming from. Like I finally had to come to the grips with, yeah, I made the right decision. I hope that person forgives me for, for being the one that left. But at the end of the day, like, just like you said, I knew that was the only way for me to be happy. I just came to that decision as the only way for me to be happy. And I didn't so much concern myself with the reconciliation part because I kind of just had to move on and search for happiness in other ways. And it just wasn't healthy for me to worry about the reconciliation piece in that specific situation.
Yeah.
But that's still tough for me because I'm guilt. And I didn't do anything like egregious or harmful or anything like that. It was just, I knew it was the right thing. And it was 20 years.
Yeah.
So that was difficult. I still kind of deal with the guilt part of it.
And that goes into another thing we were going to address was, what makes self-forgiveness so challenging.
I see it, like you said earlier, I kind of see it, or I've always felt like it was like showing weakness. I'm just talking about for me.
Like to forgive yourself?
Yes. I felt like even if I was forgiving myself, I felt like it was like me being weak.
Like you haven't punished yourself enough.
Right. So.
Well.
And I felt like it was like self-forgiveness to me was like, it was like outwardly like owning that you made a poor choice or a bad decision or poor decision, not bad decision, but because I still feel like my decision was the right one. But it's almost like I didn't want people to know that I was capable of making like such poor choices or bad decisions or like risky decisions or risky, you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Because again, I don't want to associate the decision of my divorce to say that it was a bad decision. I don't want those two things to be the same. You know what I mean? Because it's not the same.
Right.
I'm saying in general. I'm not even talking about that specifically. If I did make a poor choice or a bad decision that required me to forgive myself, it's like I didn't want people to see that I was capable of doing that. And so I would hate myself for it. Yeah, and I would even sometimes like resent me for putting myself in that type of like mental cage match.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But I mean, as I've gotten older, I'm way more forgiving of myself. Again, I don't try to put myself in those kind of situations where I need to forgive, but if I do, I'm not as hard on myself because of the, age has definitely taught me that we're not perfect human beings.
Yeah, and that's another thing I was going to mention. Like, when you enter into a relationship with someone of any kind, all of us, we are guaranteed two things. One, that other person is going to be imperfect. And two, that person is not a mind reader.
Right. That's a great point.
So you are obligated to be honest and authentic and extend some grace. Because you know those two things going in, right? Meaning they're going to screw up. It's not always going to be on purpose to hurt me.
Right.
And I can't punish them for things that without setting expectations. So they can't read my mind. So if they're not meeting my needs, whose fault is that?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a great
point. So if you go into relationship with those two things in mind and knowing how important authenticity and honesty and grace are, I think it's easier to work through those hurts because we're going to hurt each other. But I've also learned that and see, I didn't know that in my first marriage. So even though he was in the wrong, and I think that he would admit that at the time, I'm not sure that he was able to admit that to himself, but even though he was in the wrong, in order to move on without an apology, a sincere apology, I had to ask myself, what part of this can I own? Because if I wait for an external force to heal me, I'm going to be waiting forever. And I'm going to be in pain forever. Mm-hmm. I had to own some part of it so I could heal. Because no one was going to heal me. He was not going to swoop in and heal me.
Right.
And even when things got better, I noticed it didn't heal me. So I had to figure that out. So anyone who's struggling with that apology you're never going to get, you have to ask yourself, what part can I own? So for example, I confronted, I sincerely made efforts to fix what I knew was wrong. But I know that I know now I didn't do it the right way. Mm-hmm. And I think that my style, my approach pushed him away. So little by little, when I could own my shit, because I'm not perfect, when I could start to own my shit, I started to feel better. And so by year 4, I felt like a different person and a stronger person. I was also set up to love the next person differently. So by the time Josh came into my life, I didn't recognize myself, and I mean that in a good way. Mm-hmm. But there were 10 very dark years. And we talk about self-forgiveness. When I've had to ask for forgiveness, I've learned how to atone properly, but I've also learned that there's a limit. So if you're with someone who says they accept your apology, who says they forgive you, but keeps punishing you for it.
Their actions show differently.
And you have to keep atoning. I know now that there's a limit, whereas before I would have gone on forever because I deserved it.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's not enough for someone to forgive you. You've also got to forgive yourself too, for things to work. How can you know when you've truly forgiven someone? Because like I said, all these years later, there are still triggers where I feel that sting. But I'm here to say that pain is not a trustworthy indicator. So just because so much time has passed, you shouldn't feel any pain about it anymore. No, the hurt's going to linger the longest. It will diminish, but that's going to last the longest, and you have to give yourself some grace. But it doesn't mean you haven't forgiven that person. Because again, what I said at the beginning is I believe forgiveness is releasing that person from the debt they owe you. Mm-hmm. So I can feel that hurt. I can feel that minute of resentment or sadness or anger about the whole thing. But when I think of that person, I want nothing but good. And I don't hold him responsible for healing my heart anymore. That's forgiveness.
That's very big of you, Mary Beth. That's very big of you. I think you nailed it, though. It's like I've thought about that often. It's like, if anything, I will do relationships differently because of that. Like, I've had that thought many times in the last year or so. It definitely taught me how to do things differently.
Well, as hard as it is to forgive someone who's not sorry, how do you forgive yourself when there's no way to make amends? How do you forgive yourself when that person's gone? How do you forgive yourself when that person says it's okay, but you still feel like you inwardly punish yourself?
Yeah.
Like, I thought that this is not something that I mentioned the fire. Mm. But then, because I was in such a bad place for so long as a single mom, I used to tell myself, because this was a different kind of forgiveness. Mm. I used to tell myself, one day when she's old enough, We'll talk about this, the mistakes I made that affect her life. And I'll find out if she forgives me. And we've had those conversations because she's 20. Mm-hmm. And of course, she thinks that I roped the moon. Or hung the moon, what's the expression? Mm-hmm. Surprise, surprise, it did not release me.
Really?
No.
Why is that, you think?
Why is that? I know. I know it's because we're talking about things that cannot be fixed. You cannot go back and parent that child better. You can moving forward. Mm-hmm. But you can't undo that damage. So my experience with self-forgiveness has been very tough since I was 18. Mm-hmm. Since I burned the house down. And then I cheated on someone I truly, truly loved. And they forgave me. It ultimately didn't work out, but that makes you go, what kind of person am I? Because that used to be unforgivable to me. But I've done it, so I understand the other side of it now. And I understand that people can do that and still truly, truly want to make it right. And that's another thing with self-forgiveness. How can you forgive yourself? How can you stop punishing yourself when there's no way to ever make it right? So yeah, that brings me back to what I said earlier. Is when I was young, I thought forgiveness was solely transactional. My grown-up experience with forgiveness has been the complete opposite. It's been very, very lonely. But healing. Mm-hmm. And I've learned a lot about myself, and it's also it informs how I treat my husband. It informs how I treat my daughter now. I'm quick to forgive and to ask for forgiveness, especially with my husband, because I don't want to hurt him. And I don't want to put things under the rug. And I don't want to just assume he'll forgive me because he loves me so much, right? Mm-hmm. And I've also, I think any parent of a teenage daughter especially can understand. As a Christian, you struggle to feel worthy. Like Easter, we celebrate for a reason. We celebrate because of what he did. Yet, as Christians, it is so hard to feel worthy of that. Because God, his forgiveness is supernatural. But I've even come to understand that part, my relationship with God and what forgiveness there means, simply by having a daughter who is pretty damn abusive. I mean, anyone who has a teenage daughter can attest to the fact that it's like an abusive relationship, and you forget very quickly all the offenses against you.
My teenage daughter is an angel.
She's an angel. Mine is not. She's what I call a beautiful, adorable, lovely little monster. But she's got a good heart, and she loves me dearly, but she's also quite abusive sometimes. Just that relationship helps me get a tiny, tiny glimpse into what it means, what God means when he says, I forgive and I forget. Your sins are forgotten. And I don't keep punishing Mallory for mouthing off to me or calling the cops on me that one time she was 15
right.
and going through some shit.
Yeah.
I know what it is to quickly and easily let go, like forget those things, and move on and not let it damage long term our relationship. And that's given me a tiny, tiny glimpse into what God is for us and what Jesus did for us. And one more thing I'll say about self-forgiveness as a Christian. And I apologize for the sound quality of my voice, all stuffy and everything. But I heard in a podcast, a Christian podcast recently, someone said, if you know that God has forgiven you, and that slate is wiped clean, but you can't forgive yourself, tell me why your standards are so much higher than God's. That is tough. So yeah, what I've learned is that forgiveness is very hard. When apology is not coming and when reconciliation is not an option. And it's also possible to forgive, but also walk away. And I've learned that pain is not the marker for how successful our forgiveness was. Mm-hmm. And I've learned that self-forgiveness is hardest of all.
Yeah, I get that. I struggle so much with the anxiety and tension of it all that I just, you know me well enough now. I cannot function with that feeling.
Yeah.
Of anxiety or tension or stress. I can't. I'm very, very bad at that. So.
And I think in your situation, you were kind of, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you were in a situation where there was so much built up that it was at a certain point impossible to unpack and work through. Mm-hmm. At that point, it's hard for both parties to know who's right, who's wrong, where you went wrong, and where you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't, yeah. It was
when
tough.
you have so much history and so the pile has grown so big, right? Because you avoid, you appease.
Yeah. And then there was so much time invested in it. There was so many years that if anything was rehashed or brought back up, it was almost like revisionist history.
Right. You were just having the same fight over and over and over
Yeah,
again.
And sometimes it would be the same story or it'd be about the same thing, but the story would change. I just couldn't. I'm not going to sit there and try to piece all that together and say, no, that's wrong, or you're saying that wrong, or that's not really what happened. It was just almost just too much. It was almost crippling for me.
Yeah.
So I don't beat myself up over it as much, but because I feel like it does make me stronger to just kind of own stuff and just forgive and just be done with it. To myself, I'm not I don't feel like I'm at the point where I'm going to that person being like, hey, let's talk about me forgiving whatever. It's not going to be that, but
well, it's not always necessary to do that.
It's not healthy for me. It wouldn't be healthy for me to do that. So I don't know. I just feel like I'm letting things go a little bit easier, and I just don't function well with the sitting on stuff and thinking about it and overanalyzing it and wondering and not having control over how somebody reacts to it and stuff. So it's just, yeah.
Do you think anything's unforgivable?
Yes. I'm very hard-headed about this one. Now, to me, I think it's a matter of perception. People have their own deep personal beliefs about things. And so for me, I have a deep personal belief that if you harm a family member or a child or anyone else that I love, there's no amount of time or healing that would make it forgivable. at all. And I don't care if from a biblical perspective I'm wrong. That's how I feel.
Not even if the person was sorry.
No.
You would not offer forgiveness.
No. It has to be like, I'm not talking about like if you said something, if you called them a name or something like
No,
that.
you're talking about big unforgivables.
I'm talking about big unforgivables. You know, if it's like hurting somebody's feelings or calling them a poor choice of word, like a name.
I get it.
Yeah. Okay. I can maybe, yeah.
But you do feel certain that there is a point where forgiveness is not an option, no matter what.
Don't draw that line. Once you draw that line and go past it, it's bad. It's bad. You know, I kind of just have like, I think a lot of guys have that protective kind of gene to them. So it's like people that I feel like are very near and dear to me. It doesn't just have to be my kids, you know that. But it's like, I can't reconcile that. If somebody does something to them in such a way where it causes irreparable harm, whether emotionally or physically, I can't forgive that.
I know that there is a point.
Do you think that's bad?
No. If that's what works for you, then who am I to say it's bad? But I personally, I know that there's a limit for me. No, I don't think there's anything unforgivable. For a couple of reasons. One, God calls us all to forgive. Regardless of who or what, and regardless of remorse or repentance or not, God calls us to forgive. But God also does not call us to be abused. He doesn't call us to be used and abused and deceived over and over again by the same. So while I would say for me, there's nothing unforgivable, forgiveness is always on the table. I will forgive, but reconciliation is not always on the table. I'm much better at recognizing, like, I forgive you, but you're dead to me. I forgive you, but we're done.
Okay, I don't buy that 100%.
You don't?
No. If somebody killed my daughter or my son, I would never, ever, ever, ever forgive them, ever, no matter what. And it doesn't matter to me what the Bible says. It doesn't matter to me what God says. And I consider myself a spiritual, I believe in that stuff.
You're a believer.
But in that circumstance, in that particular circumstance, that's just going to have to be set to the side.
Yeah, but I understand. But I would be willing to forgive. First of all, because that's what God tells us to do, and God won't forgive us if we don't forgive others. It's in the Lord's Prayer. It's in the Bible multiple times.
Well, he and I are just going to have to argue that one out.
No, I understand. And I certainly don't say this lightly. I don't mean to imply that it would be easy. I don't mean to imply that I would be quick to do it. Because again, forgiveness is a process. But I do know. I know what pain is. And I know people who've hurt me, I have suffered more than them. And I know that in not being willing to forgive, I'm only creating more pain and hell for myself. The anguish is unbearable. And so I can't let someone have that much power over my life. So for me, forgiveness is an act of protecting my own peace. Forgiveness is releasing you. Like, you no longer own real estate in my head. but I forgive you. I no longer see myself as an authority in your life to cast punishment on you. That's not my job. You know what I'm saying?
No, I get it. I just still can't. I can't get there.
I just know that
Yeah.
if I don't forgive, the pain is only going. It's like drinking poison and waiting for the other person who hurt you to die.
Yeah, and see, my thought is, and I guess this is more like in the extreme circumstances. Like, again, if you're like talking shit about a kid that, you know what I mean, or if somebody was talking shit about you, like, I know that's not as extreme. I guess I'm talking more like extreme circumstances.
I am too.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, like, that pain will never go away, no matter if I forgive or not.
The pain will never go away. Sure, of losing someone you love. But the anger...
Well, it's not even losing, it's like hurting. Like, if you physically hurt someone that I love.
Right. But the anger and the resentment is poison. I even actually read
But
study...
forgiving that person to me, for me, not you, that would not relieve that.
And I think a lot of people feel the way that you do because people want to believe that forgiveness is letting someone off the hook. Forgiveness is saying what they did was okay, or that you're okay with what they did, and that is not what forgiveness is. I think people disagree about what forgiveness is, and we disagree about what it isn't.
Yeah, but you said there was no right or wrong.
We disagree
on how we define it.
Right. We were both correct because we're both correct in the definition. It's just that the prominence of the self-healing part of it is what came to mind for you first, and mine was the other.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean when there's no right or wrong. Like, forgiveness is many things, but forgiveness is not and is never. People are wrong when they believe the lie that forgiveness is saying what you did was okay to me.
Right.
Or what you did to my loved one was okay. Or I'm letting you off the hook. You can forgive someone and still pursue consequences. But justice will happen there. Justice is not my job. I forgive you, but you still deserve to be in prison for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I can't get there.
But I'm not going to let you cause my soul to blacken from anger and resentment.
Yeah, I can't get there.
If you could, well, I forgot. The Bible says there is one unforgivable sin, and that is the blasphemy against Christ, where you knowingly reject him and walk away and don't look back. Just a little tidbit there.
See, I'm not doing that.
Little tidbit there. Trump's hair has always been unforgivable to me. If you could wave a magic wand and instantly forgive a past wrong, who or what would you forgive? If you could wave a magic wand and instantly forgive a past wrong, who or what would you forgive? I have one. I'll go first. Rachel should have forgiven Ross. I've always believed it.
Kissing the copy girl.
They were on a break.
Oh, I said kissing. Doing more than that.
Yeah. When he called, Mark was there. What was he supposed to think? She had just said, I want a break from us. An hour or two later, he calls her to try to make amends, and Mark's in the background. What's he supposed to think?
Right.
It's not his fault he didn't get the message on the machine saying, I don't want to break up. She should have forgiven him.
I agree.
I feel strongly about
I
this.
agree. I'm on your side, Mary Beth.
And I hate the episodes after the breakup.
I do too.
The first few episodes after the breakup. And also, they spent way too much time pitting those two against each other in the following seasons after that breakup. But I'm Team Ross on the whole we were on a break crap. if I could wave a magic wand and instantly forgive a past wrong, here's one I'm going to struggle with for a long time. And I take this as seriously as someone hurting someone I love. The COVIDians.
Oh, the COVID stuff.
Look, man, I'm gonna get my kid,
Lord.
man. I had people online calling me stupid, calling me a grandma killer. When your kid looks at you and says, I don't want to live anymore. When they were least at risk in the whole population.
They said that because what? Because you were getting?
Because when people on social media were arguing back and forth about, it is time to reopen. We have got to get back to our life. We have got to get these kids back in school. We have, it's a virus, and a virus is going to virus. And the only way is through. Mm-hmm. But you get called all kinds of names, and you get accused of wanting elderly to die. And it's like, you know what? I don't. And I'm really pissed off at these restrictions because I know that people had to say goodbye to their loved ones over fucking FaceTime or through a fucking window. No, I don't want that. But when it comes to kids versus the elderly, we save the fucking kids. Mm-hmm. And my kid was hurt. My kid will never be the same. She developed OCD. She's on medication. She developed panic attacks. What they put those kids through. And it's hard for me to forgive that. Because we knew early on, very early on, even the Pediatric Association, whatever, was saying, kids can go back to school. It was just a terrible, terrible thing. And I want to say unforgivable because a lot of people want to act like that just never happened. But it did. And the effects are going to last a long time.
Yeah. God,
And
I hate Facebook so
damn. And we're not, and I don't just mean Facebook.
Well, but that was the bulk of it.
But I mean, like, institutions that...
I get that, but when you said social media, that's the bulk of it.
That extended these things unnecessarily because they got power hungry. I'd like to say that's unforgivable, but no, it'll take time. It'll take time. What would you...
Okay, I'm not even going to give you a serious one. I'm only giving you a silly one because we have to lighten the mood here.
I'm sorry.
I would forgive little Doug Bender for riding over my right arm with a big wheel. I didn't forgive him for a long time. I was like 5 years old and he was riding my big wheel, and for whatever stupid reason, it's pretty much my fault. I was like laying on the concrete driveway at our old house, two houses ago, growing up, and he rode over my right arm with a big wheel, and I resented him forever about that. So if you're out there listening, Doug Bender, I forgive you.
I forgive you.
Because my arm is like, it's not like bent, but I can straighten it in such a weird way that it looks different than my left arm. Damn Doug Bender.
Never be the same.
Never the same.
Well, just some closing thoughts. I think at this age, we can't help but face our own mortality, like you said. And that inevitably leads to thoughts about our relationships and with each other, with ourselves, and what we're willing or not willing to do to improve, to heal, to restore. And so forgiveness on someone's part will likely be part of that process. You can take a life's too short approach. Or if you're like me, maybe you got enough baggage under your eyes, you don't need to be carrying anymore around. So forgiveness is beneficial no matter how you define it, no matter if you're guided by biblical forgiveness or not. It's important and it's helpful for people to heal and move on. Would you agree?
Yes, but I do want God to listen to me if he's listening.
You feel like you got to clarify.
Listen, I get what
You made some strong statements.
I get what it says, and I get what we're expected to do. But in my opinion, with just respect to that, if God is who he says he is, then he needs to appreciate also where I'm coming from.
Well, sure, of course.
As a loving, caring person.
God knows your heart.
That's what I mean. I'll leave it at that.
But God also looks out for you by punishing those who deserve it.
I know. But I'm going to get my lick in.
I totally get it. And that's why I said, I'll repeat what I said earlier. True forgiveness, because you're talking about stuff that sounds impossible to forgive. True forgiveness is indeed supernatural. Because it ain't easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I buy that.
And I think it takes God. For many people, maybe it doesn't. It takes God to forgive things that cause you true pain. Well,
Happy Easter, everybody.
Happy Easter. Happy Easter. Good news.
Oh, God.
The good news.
Hope you guys got full baskets of all the best treats.
Eat some Cadbury. You know, I've never had a Cadbury.
I've only had like 2 in my whole life, but I always thought they looked amazing.
I am team Reese eggs.
Oh, God, yeah. I could
100%.
all of that. 100%, yeah.
I hope your baskets are filled with those.
Yeah. But I did. I remember when I was a kid, those commercials just like captivated me.
They look good.
Where they would undo the egg and the
cream.
Or I'm sorry, the chocolate, right?
The cream oozes out.
Or I guess it was the egg, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I was like, give me that, all of that. And I think I want to try it like once or twice. I don't think Mom ever really got that.
No, it was never in our house.
Thanks, Mom.
But it always looked worth trying.
Oh, yeah.
Still haven't.
So good. But
Still
yeah,
haven't.
I'm Reese egg as well.
All right. Well, I hope you get yours. Thank you so much for listening to another piece of the Gen X experience we're saving. Whether it's coming to you or from you, forgiveness isn't an easy process. Today felt like a good place to start the conversation, and it's now been immortalized in the annals of history. If you like what you heard, subscribe to the Best of Gen X wherever you get your podcast so you never miss an episode. Joe, always a pleasure.
Duh.